Welcome to another edition of the Taking Down Trump podcast. I'm Tristan Snell. Coming up, we're going to be discussing just a teensy bit of a story that happened this week. Yes, it is the withdrawal of Joe Biden and the sudden and immediate surge to the Democratic nomination clinched last night by Vice President Kamala Harris. We're going to be breaking down this unprecedented event from multiple different angles, including a deep dive into exactly how former California AG Kamala Harris can use the New York AG's office's playbook for taking down Trump. But first, we have to cover a truly disturbing story that broke this morning regarding a woman named Sonia Massey. New video cropped up regarding the murder of Sonia Massey by a police officer in Illinois in her own home, where she was making herself some tea while talking to two police officers after she had reported a prowler outside her home and in her neighborhood. She had this pot of hot water. She was talking to the officers. You can see all of this on the video. She held her hands up. Her last words were, "I'm sorry." And they shot her. The guy shot her. This officer had been shuttled around from different police office before he ultimately ended up on this one force. 5 different resignation or termination situations prior to ending up on that police force. 5 of them. He had been at 5 different jobs in the previous 5 years or so. Why? And why was he on that police force at all? How could this happen again? How does this keep happening? What are we going to do about it? That is one of the biggest questions if we're talking about law and justice in America, is this unfinished business regarding police violence. And of course, this is not all officers, but the fact that it keeps happening because of the holes in our system, the fact that our justice system simply is not built to deal with this problem. In 99.999% of other cases, the prosecutors and the police are working together. They're not on opposite sides of the ball. They're working together. The police officer or the federal agent or whomever is a witness, right? Those are usually the key witnesses for the prosecution. Police and prosecutors spend a lot of time together. They're colleagues. They socialize together. They're at the same holiday parties. It is just simply human nature that it is going to be very difficult to then say to that prosecutor's office, okay, now you've got to go after one of the police officers that you work with all the time. That's a very, very difficult thing. That's why one of the just immediate low-hanging fruit reforms that has got to be adopted nationally, it's been adopted in some states like New York, has been to say, look, when that happens, you can't have that local DA's office prosecuting that case against that officer. It's got to be handled by a special unit elsewhere through some other authorities, say the state AG's office. That's what we did here in New York. That's something that needs to happen nationally. Okay. But what are we going to do to stop this? The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that was on Capitol Hill, it almost passed a couple of different times. It didn't quite pass the last time that it was up in 2021. That is unfinished business. And that is something that needs to pass. There needs to be some coming together here to realize that we want to keep our streets safe. We want to keep our police safe, but we also need to make sure that when there is violence committed by a police officer, that there's accountability. Better yet, that we have some way to track this. One of the things that's in the George Floyd Act would be to create a federal database of every police misconduct situation. There needs to be some better way to track the bad apples, as it were, right? It is a vanishingly small minority of all the police officers in this country. However, the ones that are still persisting in the system, we need to figure out where they are, and they need to not get hired again. If somebody has had multiple different incidents, even if they were relatively minor but raised yellow flags, red flags, that person should not be able to continue to get hired where then they might actually shoot someone in cold blood in their own kitchen when they're making some tea. Okay? This can't happen anymore. It shouldn't have happened to Sonia Massey. It shouldn't happen to anybody else. We need to do something about it because it's not an isolated incident. It keeps happening over and over and over again. And when are we going to do something about it? So now let's move on to our next story. The big story of the week, of course, is that there's this guy named Joe Biden, and he just decided he didn't want to run for another 4 years of his job. And so he's, pulling out of the running. Small things, small potatoes. And all of a sudden, this other person that had been the number 2 waiting in the wings in 31 hours manages to clinch the Democratic nomination. She's already secured all the delegates. She did it last night. Okay, let's just rewind here because it already just feels like a whirlwind of a dream of something. 2 p.m. Eastern time, roughly, Biden announces that he's not running. 10 minutes later, he announces that he is endorsing his vice president, Kamala Harris, to run for president and to be the Democratic nominee. And then it's over in the blink of an eye. $231 million. That's as of last evening. I don't even know what it's up to today as we tape now on Tuesday. $231 million that she raised from all sources. Almost half of that came from small donors, and a very large portion of that actually came from first-time donors. These are staggering numbers. Endorsements from basically every major elected official on the Democratic side, including all of the other people that might have run against her in some kind of primary process or contested or open convention, which clearly certain people were cheering for. A lot of people in the media were salivating over this prospect, but they're not going to get it now. Oh, well, sorry, guys. What they are going to get, though, is I think one of the most hotly anticipated conventions that I can think of in my lifetime. I think probably this might be even more of an anticipated convention than the 2008 convention with Obama. And that's really saying something for those of you who remember that, how much everybody was looking forward to his acceptance speech. I think that seeing Obama, Barack Obama, seeing Michelle Obama, seeing Joe Biden give what will really be in a lot of ways a valedictory speech is probably not going to leave a lot of dry eyes in the House, I don't think. I think a lot of people feel the way I do, of an enormous degree of gratitude to Joe Biden for getting us through the last couple of years, for picking up the pieces after COVID, after January 6th, taking the country from where it was to where it is now, and then having the patriotism and the selflessness to actually say, you know what, fine, I am going to stop. But let's just be clear about what we saw here. That was nothing short of a political D-Day. That was the most extraordinary 24 to 36 hours that you're ever going to see, maybe. Well, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen next? But there's never been anything like this in American political history, ever. Nothing like it. Nothing at all. So this is really, really, really interesting. 94% of Democrats in a poll that just came out approve of Kamala Harris being the nominee and plan to vote for her in November. 94%. That is insane unity. This whole Democrats in disarray thing that the mainstream media keeps on wanting to push out there is such utter garbage. It could not be further from the truth. I don't think I've hardly ever seen a political party as unified as the Democratic Party is right now at this exact moment. And I don't know that it's going to change. I think there's 106 days, 105 days left now in the campaign. I think you're going to see a sprint and a crusade to get Kamala Harris into the White House. I think that's what you're going to see. Let's move on to some of the other ramifications here, though, because there's a lot of other interesting things in play here. One of them is, well, this all started with the debate back at the end of June. It feels like a year ago now, but that was only a few weeks ago. So there was a second debate that had been scheduled for September to be hosted by ABC News. Donald Trump, who had been really wanting to have this debate again so he could continue to score points on Joe Biden, has now been trying to wiggle out of the debate. He doesn't want to do it anymore. He's now saying that, oh, no, this is unfair and the debate should now be on Fox News for kind of vague reasons that have something to do with Biden dropping out. The overall thing that we're getting from MAGA land right now is that they were not prepared for this. As a couple of people have pointed out online, it's like the Trump folks, the notion to them that someone would actually do anything other than selfish self-aggrandizement is so foreign to them. They never dreamed that Biden would actually step aside, and they actually don't know what to do about it now that he has. And now the prospect of going up against Kamala Harris, former prosecutor, former San Francisco district attorney, former California attorney general, Kamala Harris, former senator on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Kamala Harris, who delivered some really priceless moments of cross-examining various witnesses from her perch on that committee. Donald Trump maybe doesn't want to go up against Harris. I wouldn't if I were him. That's not exactly a battle he's going to win. So he's now in a really lose-lose situation. Either he does duck out of any further debates, making it very clear that he's scared of her, or he's actually going to have to face off against her. And that is going to be highly entertaining, I think, to see the prosecutor face off against the convicted felon. So we'll have that to look forward to. Maybe. We'll have to see. Or Trump's just going to be a chicken. Coming up next, we'll talk about our big story of the week, Kamala Harris. Back to the 2024 campaign again. Now we really see what this election is actually about, and it's going to be about Donald Trump. This is now a referendum on Trump. When the incumbent president is running for re-election, it is a long-held shibboleth in American politics. That means that that campaign is really a referendum on that incumbent. Okay, so like it or not, this was going to be a referendum on Joe Biden. I personally was of the belief that Biden's record, and as contrasted with the dumpster fire that Trump left him and the convictions and the insurrection and everything, made a very strong case for Joe Biden. But now Joe Biden's not running. Yeah, you can say, oh, well, the Republicans are already saying, well, Harris was part of it too, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have the same resonance as the guy that you've been watching on television the last few years, still standing up there talking about running for re-election. It's different. It lands different. It feels different. There's a different vibe to it. Harris, even though she is the sitting vice president, it's not going to be a referendum on her because she wasn't in charge. So it actually puts her in a really interesting position because she gets to claim some credit for the things that have been going well. But at the end of the day, she is her own person. She is her own candidate. She is a new person running for this top spot as the presidential nominee. It's a different ballgame now. This puts a lot of the focus back onto Donald Trump. Nikki Haley, earlier in this campaign, back in the winter during the primaries, memorably said that whichever party jettisoned its 80-year-old first would win. She now maybe is wishing she hadn't said that, given that she's now turned to toadying back up to Donald Trump. But what ended up happening here was that Donald Trump is now the only almost 80, 78, but he's the only superannuated person left in the race. And he goes off on a lot of crazy tangents all the time that could just be him, could be age, could be a combination of both. But when you're worrying about sharks versus electric boats and constantly bringing up Hannibal Lecter for some weird reason, you kind of have to wonder about his state. And is the media actually going to start reporting on this now that Biden isn't in the race anymore? Are they actually going to pay attention to what has been there all along, that he does not look or sound at all like he did 4 years ago, let alone 8 years ago? He is not the same guy. And are we finally going to understand that? Are we finally going to appreciate that? Are we finally going to hear about that from these large media outlets that still drive a lot of the narrative for information in this country? Are we actually going to see it? This will be an interesting test. in my view, because either they're going to start focusing on Trump's age as well for the good of the country, or they're not, and they're going to out themselves as not having been concerned with the state of America, but they were simply in the bag for Trump because he's good for ratings. He's good for clicks. He's been wonderful for the news business. Everything that happens in the news needs to be taken with a giant grain of salt with how it's reported, because we have to remember that the for-profit companies that drive a lot of this narrative have a very strong financial interest in the continued perpetuity of Donald Trump as a national figure in American politics. You have to know that. It is just a reality. And some of them mean well. I think some particular figures in the space certainly mean well. I'm not saying everybody's in the bag for him, but this will be an interesting test. Do you actually focus on the danger that Donald Trump brings as now officially the oldest nominee who's going to stand for election on election day, oldest presidential nominee in American history? He will be the oldest president ever if he were to win and complete a 4-year term. The danger that that puts us in. And then let's turn to the other part of that danger, which is then you now have taken a 78-year-old crazy, unstable, wannabe fascist and put him in that post. And now you have in the number 2 slot a 39-year-old with only a year or so of elected office under his belt, who has made equally by turns very critical positions against his number 1, then completely sucked up to him, and then also stated a whole variety of extremist positions, seemingly in a craven opportunist bid for power. And of course, I'm talking about J.D. Vance. He of the Diet Mountain Dew, which, by the way, he talked about it in that video clip, which I hope you've seen, as though he had just found out about it for the first time. Mind you, I'm pretty sure Diet Mountain Dew has been on the market for like 25 years now. And mind you, talking about Diet Mountain Dew does not make you country. So if he's trying to show his cred as being from Appalachia, try again, my friend. That didn't really land too well. That was not quite as bad as the please clap moment from Jeb Bush, but it was up there. So what's really going on there with J.D. Vance? I mean, I think we have to ask a lot of questions about whether or not he's ready for national office. No one's talking about that. Is J.D. Vance actually ready to be president? If Donald Trump gets elected and something happens to him because he's 78 and doesn't exactly have the most healthy lifestyle on the planet, what would happen? What is going to happen with J.D. Vance? Is he at all ready to be the commander-in-chief? Is he at all ready to understand all of the different intricacies of the national government? Or is he just going to be a Manchurian candidate that is going to be taking his cues from his big donors and handlers like Peter Thiel, and presumably along with Thiel, his sort of alter ego in the public space, Elon Musk? Who's going to be really controlling Vance? Because Vance is not really ready for any of this. He's been a senator for a hot minute, and mostly has used that post to just do a whole bunch of shit posting online and get on TV a little bit more often than he used to before that. Is he ready? Because really on paper, he looks like one of the youngest, most inexperienced vice presidential nominees in American history. You can go look it up. Okay. And is he really ready for that, given that we've now got the pairing of such an old presidential nominee and then such a young VP? But we may not be able to ask ourselves that question for long, because now there are rumblings, because the news just keeps on going nuts. There are now rumblings that Trump is actually thinking about dumping Vance, and that some of the insiders in the Trump campaign are advocating for this. Why? Because I think there's a feeling that, look, it looks by all impressions that Vance was put in there to kind of double down on the base. Vance was not put in there to win over soccer moms in the suburbs. He wasn't there to win over swing voters. He was there to double down on MAGA. I think there was an impression that that was going to be true. I'll tell you the real reason, though, and we're still not talking about this enough. That was a money play, because literally not even 48 hours before that, we had Elon Musk pledging his $45 million a month to Donald Trump's super PAC. Okay. And then less than 48 hours after that, we get J.D. Vance put up as the veto by Trump. That was not a mistake. That was not an accident. That was not a coincidence. That was very much a quid pro quo. There is no way around it. All roads lead back to Peter Thiel. He's been Musk's brains for a long time, and he's the brains and money behind J.D. Vance as well. And that was very much what was going on there. That was a money play to open up that Musk money and the money that will follow Musk. There's a lot of other people that are probably going to put more money into the race now that Musk has said that he's supporting Trump. Now, potentially that money goes away if they dump J.D. Vance. Is that deal revocable? Is there a way that they could put somebody else in there that's acceptable to Thiel and Musk that isn't J.D. Vance, that maybe would poll better, that maybe isn't on a video clip saying that he believes that victims of domestic violence should remain in their marriages for the sake of their children, right? Little things like that. Are we sure that is there somebody else that could satisfy the plutocrats while maybe being a little bit more poll friendly or suburban mom friendly? Maybe the race isn't anymore about doubling down on MAGA. Maybe this is going to, this seems to have created a sense within MAGA land that maybe there needs to be more of an attempt to appeal to those swing voters rather than giving them the finger. So what is going to happen here? Could it be that he suddenly bites the bullet and tries to put Nikki Haley on the ticket at the last minute here? I don't even know how that would work mechanically, but I also just don't think he would do it. I guess Haley would probably accept, given that she has been so sycophantic suddenly, again, not unpredictably. What else are we going to see here? Who else is he going to put up? That's obviously going to be something else that we really need to keep on watching there as we understand the fallout from Sunday and Monday's big events. Those are just some of the major stories I've been covering this week. As always, for the latest, make sure to follow me on Twitter and subscribe to the Substack. Coming up, we'll be talking about how Kamala Harris can take down Trump. So welcome back to the show. We're doing our deep dive this week on the rebooted 2024 election, where we have the prosecutor versus the felon. And I want to take this back a year and talk about the lessons that you can apply from successful prosecutions of Donald Trump and how those now apply to the presidential election, especially given this new dynamic. So this time a year ago, I was writing the Taking Down Trump book. I wrote most of it in July and August of last year. And at the time, I wasn't really thinking about Kamala Harris, especially in the context of prosecution. She was DA of San Francisco. She was California AG, but those things were years ago, long before she was a senator and then VP. I was thinking about some of these other ongoing cases regarding Donald Trump. But just to back up, what the book is about, it's the playbook that we really built at the New York AG's office, starting with the Trump University case, which I helped run, and then going on from there. The Trump Foundation case regarding his charity, that was the thing where they were diverting money from like kids' cancer charities and things like that to line their personal pockets, pay off various legal and expenses, write political fundraising checks, fun things like that. And then the New York AG civil fraud case against Trump, the $464 million judgment that Tish James's office won earlier this year. This playbook for how to defeat Trump really started with the Trump University case, has been built up over the past decade, and it's very clear that a lot of other prosecutors' offices have been mostly following that since then. And the book was designed to share that playbook, that blueprint with everybody so that we have an understanding together of what it means to win one of these cases, what it takes to win one of these cases, what happens, what stumbling blocks come up, how can they be overcome. So I boiled it down to these 12 rules. Now, not all of them necessarily apply to a political situation, but it turns out a lot of them do. And So now what I've tried to do here is let's take the rules from the book and talk about how prosecutor Kamala Harris can use them to become President Kamala Harris as she goes after Donald Trump here and makes the case to America about why she should be president and not have him back. And one of the first things is, if you look at the first part of the book, is all about leadership. And that's already kind of a foregone conclusion here, this zealous leadership. Just the very decision to even take Trump on in the first place is obviously something that Harris is now doing, but she's also doing it with a gusto and with an eye on the prosecutorial angle of this. She's already made a number of statements about how Donald Trump is a lot like some of the people that she put away as a sexual predator, as a fraudster. She brought a lot of these perpetrators to justice over the years. In other words, she understands the assignment. And this dynamic is not going to be lost on people. We're going to see somebody who, I think a few years ago, her prosecution background was viewed as a liability. I believe that now it's going to be viewed as a plus, given the dynamic against Trump, given that there's more of a focus right now in a lot of political circles on crime, even though violent crime is actually way down. And it's worth noting as an aside, it is actually at much, much lower levels nationwide, including in most big cities. It is at a much lower level than it ever was during the 4 years of Donald Trump. The Biden years have actually been way, way better in that regard. 2024 has been the best year yet. We're now back to historically low levels of violent crime all over the country. But let's just put that aside for now. Let's move on to one of the other rules from the book. Rule 5, and each rule in the book is a chapter. Rule 5 talks about, in the context of a legal case, allying yourselves with the former vendors and business partners that Trump has screwed over. A lot of those people can be allies that you can then work with to make your case. And in fact, it was a lot of how I helped break open the Trump University case by working with a former vendor of his that had been stiffed on an invoice. I tell that whole story in the book. In the context of politics, though, there's an interesting analog here that I think Harris and her team should explore. And they probably are already, I'm sure. But to what extent can you go after Trump's former political partners, former cronies that he's kicked to the curb? Is there a universe in which you can actually get some of those people to be helpful? I think somebody like his former chief of staff, John Kelly, is a very logical place to start. Kelly's been very outspoken regarding Trump and his poor quality of leadership, his poor decision-making, and his unfitness to serve. But what about, let's dream a little bit bigger here. What about Chris Christie? Is it possible that Harris could actually get Christie to endorse her? Maybe. It's not completely beyond the realm of possibility. I can already hear some of you saying, but I don't really want Chris Christie endorsing Kamala. She doesn't need him. I get that. It's true. But I think any ally we can get, this is going to be a tough race. We're walking on clouds right now, but it's going to be a tough race. And I think we all know that. Any ally is a worthwhile ally to get. And are there actually still some people out there who care what Chris Christie has to say? Yes, there are. I do think there's a cadre of moderate Republicans who actually would love to hear what Chris Christie has to say on this, who still respect him and who would still care if he endorsed Kamala Harris. So what about Mike Pence? Again, probably not going to happen, right? He is very, very, very conservative. I think that it would be a real stretch, but it's also not completely outside of the realm of possibility. I mean, he did almost get hanged. What about Nikki Haley? Again, could be very, very far-fetched, but I think at least those attempts to make an outreach need to be done if they're not being done already. They could be surprised at how many of these people privately have deep, deep misgivings about Trump and could be stoked into taking a more public stance in alignment with that. Haley did endorse Trump. However, that was before Trump chose J.D. Vance, which was a real rebuke to Haley and her constituency. So rather than meeting the concerns or trying to bring the Republican coalition together, have it be a bigger tent and not just about MAGA. He didn't do that. And it might be that if you called her up and courted her, took the time to listen to her, tried to see if there was something in it for her, could you give her an ambassadorship in a place where her views, which are definitely much further to the right, are not going to differ substantially enough from the rest of a Harris administration to make a big difference? That might be anathema to some people, but I think that the rules that you have to apply from these cases do have applicability to the political context. And if you can find some of these people, Trump is notoriously disloyal. Loyalty with him is a one-way street. And if we can actually get to a place where some of these former allies of Donald Trump are flipped, that could be a very, very powerful thing. Remember, 40 of the 44 cabinet members of Donald Trump have not supported him for the presidency. How many of those people could you actually get to openly stick their necks out there a little bit and say they want to support Harris? I think it could happen, and I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. So that's just me. Rule 6 from the book gets into the legal weeds about statutes of limitation. And that obviously is not directly applicable here, but again, indirectly applicable. Because while, for example, there are statutes of limitation on things like, say, sexual assault allegations, there's no such thing as a political statute of limitation in such situations. And there are 26 accusers of Donald Trump committing sexual assault. E. Jean Carroll, of course, is now the most famous, but there are 25 others. If I were Harris or on her team, I would actually say, look, let's try to get Carroll and as many of those women who want to participate to come to at least one event. Maybe you have them come to one of the debates if Trump doesn't chicken out of all of them, and you have them all sit together. That would send a very, very powerful message about exactly what America is up against when it comes to Donald Trump as a proven predator. And it might just anger him and throw him off his game, especially in the context of something like a debate, or even not, even if it's at a staged, canned event and then he's watching that on TV. Could you provoke him into some sort of foaming at the mouth rage on Truth Social? Rule 7 concerns scouring the public record to go get old statements of Trump's, something that's already been done. But this also will extend to J.D. Vance, and that's how we've gotten some of these gems about how, for example, he actually tweeted back in October 2016 that he believed that Donald Trump had committed multiple sexual assaults. He then deleted that tweet. But that research effort to go unearth all of these things is obviously a key effort in any investigation, and it applies equally in any political campaign. Rule 9 is all about making a polished, airtight argument, especially for the public and the media. This is, again, true in most political campaigns, pretty much every political campaign. It's something that Harris and her team need to make sure that they nail, because it was something that Biden and his team did not do a good enough job of in the debate, for example. Other speeches of Biden's better, but the debate was really the place where all of a sudden he turned into a policy robot. Harris's team needs to make sure that that doesn't happen. This is not an uncommon problem. Let's just rewind a bit. 1992, the famous little catchphrase that came out of that from the Clinton campaign was, "It's the economy, stupid." Now, a lot of people have misinterpreted that to mean that the stupid in that comment was the media or the public sort of being told that the economy was the main issue that year. But it was actually an inside joke that originated with James Carville, in which the Carville and some of the other senior staff were trying to keep Bill Clinton on track. Clinton was the stupid in that statement, in that joke, because Bill Clinton had a tendency, maybe more so than some other Democratic politicians, but certainly in line with them, to go on tangents of all of the 17 different policy ideas that they've got or had wanted to enact or were going to enact or whatever. And they needed to keep him on big themes, big messages. And that was the main one that they wanted him to focus on, was to focus on the economy. And that did actually help him down the stretch in 1992, where, by the way, for the record, he went from being in third place in the summer, behind both Perot and Bush to winning the presidency. So what does that mean for Harris? Again, for Harris, it's the same message that was really going to work for Biden. It's going to work for her. She's very well placed to make it. She needs to focus on democracy and the rule of law, and the contrast with Trump as an insurrectionist and a convicted felon, and then focus on being pro-choice, whereas Donald Trump made sure that now women are actually facing death just to get health care in many states, and that if elected, he would extend abortion bans nationally. Those are the top two messages for Democrats. And if Harris can stick to those, maybe throw in a joke here and there about Trump being old and crazy, she'll be good to go. Then let's talk about the most important rule out of this in terms of applicability for Harris, and that's Rule 11 from the book, which is all about standing strong in the face of Trump's inevitable personal attacks. Trump has a long, long history of trying to engage in the personal destruction of opposing parties and opposing counsel, going all the way back to his very first case where he was sued by the federal government for housing discrimination. He and his father had these apartment complexes in Brooklyn and Queens, where by one count at one point, I believe it was about 35,000 units and 8 black tenants. So you do the math in Brooklyn and Queens. But the point is, how did Donald Trump actually wiggle out from under that civil prosecution? He had Roy Cohn countersue the government and basically shred the professional and personal reputation of the, not coincidentally, female government lawyer from the Fair Housing Administration who was bringing the case. That set the tone for a lot of other matters that Trump has done throughout his entire life. And it continues to the present day. Trump will attack the integrity and family and staffers and personal life of anybody that's in his way in any of these cases, but he will be especially savage when it comes to women, when it comes to people of color, and especially to women of color. And we've seen that. During the Trump University case, the person who was then the AG of New York, Eric Schneiderman, was counterattacked by Trump for political corruption. I was attacked for supposedly falsifying witness testimony, which was completely false. Fast forward to today, you get racial verbiage and questions about credentials and qualifications when it comes to the current New York AG, Letitia James. He gets a lot more vicious and hits way further below the belt as soon as he thinks he can get away with it because it's a woman of color. Look at what he did to Fani Willis. That whole mess, engineered by Trump and his allies, was horrible. They made the whole focus about her. They unearthed every little bit of her personal life. They came after her in a horrible way. It has not deterred her, but unfortunately it did delay that case down in Georgia. Now, in this case, so to speak, the election, Trump can't delay the election. He's going to go all in on trying to destroy Kamala Harris, and she needs to be ready. She cannot let it ruffle her or rattle her in any way. She shouldn't respond. She shouldn't fall into the trap of trying to rebut everything that he's saying. She should just ignore him. That's really the best way to do it. If you're going to have other people, if you're going to try to rebut anything, do it through surrogates. But she has to remain cool as a cucumber the whole way. She cannot let any of it get to her. That'll drive him nuts, by the way. Like, a lot of the deal here is that he gets his jollies by threatening people and watching them get rattled. He's a bully. So that's a lot of what he's looking for. He's looking for a reaction. Don't give it to him. Also, he's looking to distract you from what you're trying to say. That's a lot of what he does in these cases. He wants to make sure that you're spending so much time chasing after all of his diversions that you aren't focused on your facts, your arguments, your case. And that's what she needs to do. If you're going to counterpunch, don't counterpunch on something he said about you. Counterpunch on your core case, on democracy, on him being a criminal, on him being a horrible person for America's women, on multiple levels, not just reproductive rights, but also, would you want any female friend or relative of yours being anywhere near Donald Trump ever, under any circumstances? The answer is no. Then why are you voting for him? These are things that Harris is going to be very well positioned to say, and she needs to make sure that she stays completely laser focused on her facts and her arguments, and that is how she can defeat him. That's all for today's show. As always, if you like what you're hearing, make sure to follow this podcast so that the episodes automatically download to your devices. You can watch this show on YouTube, and always make sure to follow me on Twitter and subscribe on Substack. That's it, and I'll see you next week.